This is the April 24th meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kat Siegel, chair of the CAC. Our vice chair is Naj Daniels. Before I give the chair's report, I'd like to ask Maria Lombardo, who is doubling as our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to ensure we have quorum. And then Daniela Rible, our operator for tonight, will read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Chair Siegel. When I call your name, please say present. Member Bars absent. Member Chen absent. Member Daniels present. Sorry, Vice Chair Daniels present. Member Davidson absent. Member Ford present. Ford present. Member Kim absent. Member Levine
present.
Levine present. Member Margarita present. Margarita present. Member Milford Rosales
present.
Milford Rosales present. Member Ortega absent. Chair Siegel
present.
Chair Siegel present. Chair Siegel, we have quorum.
Thank you so much. And I believe there's a public comment announcement.
Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again, or you will be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, please press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise you that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any television or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Thank you so much. That puts us on item 2, which is the chair's report, and this is an information item. CAC members have received a link to the executive director's report, which was presented at yesterday's board meeting. It is available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. I wanted to highlight a couple of items from the report. Caltrain continues to make good progress on its electrification project, working toward the planned start of revenue service this fall. As part of testing, Caltrain is planning end-to-end runs of the entire Caltrain corridor on April 27th, with 2 trains operating at the maximum allowable speed at 79 miles per hour. If you just can't get enough of trains, on May 11th, Caltrain will host an electric train tour event in San Carlos, with this public event also celebrating the railroad's 160th anniversary. More information can be found at caltrain.com/electric-train-tour. The Transportation Authority has contributed $41 million in funding for Caltrain modernization from San Francisco's half-cent sales tax for transportation and the One Bay Area grant program. SFCTA is seeking input on community enhancements for the Geary Boulevard Improvement Project that would foster a sense of identity along the project corridor. Community members weighed in on design features such as sidewalk pavers, decorative concrete, street trees, and neighborhood identity markers. The survey focuses on locations where there is opportunity to coordinate with future construction work, including where the sidewalk is planned to be expanded at 38R Geary Rapid bus stop locations. To learn more about the proposals and provide feedback via SFMTA's Community Enhancement Survey, please visit the project website at www.sfmta.com. Last month, this body had a long and thoughtful discussion on the I-280 northbound Geneva feasibility study, which also touched on work the Transportation Authority is leading on the Ocean Avenue off-ramp and the Vision Zero ramps Phase 3 study. I wanted to share with the CAC that staff has not advanced the study to the board to allow time to conduct additional community engagement, including with CAC members. Staff has offered follow-up briefings to CAC members on this suite of projects, and I'll keep you updated via chair's remarks and or future agenda items. Meeting management notes, CAC members, if you would like to speak, you could indicate so by standing your name card on its end, so it is pointing up. When I call on you to speak, press the red star sticker on the base of the microphone to turn it on. A red light below the mouthpiece indicates that the microphone is on. Kindly turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. Be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back of the room can hear you. Please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. CAC members and folks in this hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Not seeing any. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the chair's report? Seeing none, operator, is there any remote public comment on the chair's report?
Not seeing any public comment.
Great, that puts us on item 3, which is approve the minutes of the March 27th, 2024 meeting, and this is an action item. Do any CAC members have any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on the minutes? Not seeing any. Operator, is there any remote public comment?
Not seeing any remote public comment.
Great. May I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes? Moved by member Levine.
Second.
Seconded by member Milford Rosales. Could we please have a roll call vote?
Seeing on the motion to approve item 3, the minutes, member Bars absent, member Chen absent, Vice Chair Daniels. Aye. Daniels, aye. Member Davidson absent, member Ford aye. Ford aye. Member Kim absent, member Levine
Levine,
aye. Member Margarita
Margarita, aye.
Member Margarita aye. Member Milford Rosales.
Wilford Rosales, aye.
Member Milford Rosales aye. Member Ortega absent. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel aye. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The item passes.
Great. That puts us on item 4, which is to adopt a motion of support to allocate $140,000 in Prop L funds with conditions and allocate $1 million in Prop AA funds for 2 requests. And this is an action item. And Mike Pickford, Principal Transportation Planner, is here to present this item.
Good evening. As mentioned, we just have 2 requests this evening, so let's see if I can slide to it. There we go. Okay, so our first request is a Prop L request from SFCTA for $140,000 for the Golden Gate Greenway project. This project would reduce the 100 block of Golden Gate Avenue from 2 lanes to 1 lane of vehicle traffic, reconfigure the overhead catenary system wires for the trolley buses, and install a new fire hydrant and prioritize community needs for shared spaces on both sides of the roadway. Every street in the Tenderloin is on the Vision Zero high entry network, and this project aims to create a car light public space with activation and programming in partnership with the Tenderloin community. Specifically, the design scope will focus on that OCS wire design and pole placement, as well as coordination with PUC on fire hydrant details, parking and curb changes, and creating the new striping plans. Project outreach has taken place throughout the planning process in the Tenderloin, with Tenderloin Task Force District 5 and through a Golden Gate Greenway stakeholder group. Key stakeholders include the St. Anthony's Foundation, San Francisco Planning Department, members of the Tenderloin Task Force, and outreach will continue through the duration of this project. This request includes an amendment to the Safer and Complete Streets 5YPP to reprogram $40,000 from construction to design. SFMTA received a federal grant that will fund most of the project, So reprogramming these funds will not impact delivery in any way. Construction will also be funded by a future Prop L allocation, or that'll be the local match to that federal grant. Next up is a Prop AA vehicle registration fee request, also from SFMTA, for about $1 million to update transit stop signage. There's roughly 3,600 transit stops in San Francisco, the majority of which lack or have outdated signage and customer information. This project will seek to address that by adding signage with route stop and accessibility information for every mini rail and rubber tire stop. Transit stops will be upgraded with new signs, poles, more legible signage, and Muni branded solar powered lanterns on rapid and frequent lines and other locations where possible. Routes will be prioritized through a combination of factors, including presence of currently inaccurate signage, coordination with other projects, and corridor improvements, as well as ridership needs and routes that are on the Muni service equity routes, as well as requests and places that are just lacking existing signage. The work will be completed citywide, line by line, except for there's opportunities to update the signage as part of other projects. Their priority mini lines and corridors are listed in the attached allocation request form. SFMTA anticipates being able to deliver the full scope by December 2027, and they have currently been working on phase 1 of the project. Status of that project is listed in the packet, as well as a number of lessons learned that they will enable them to improve delivery for phase 2. With that, I can take any questions, and we have project managers on the line as well.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Do any members have questions or comments on item 4? I have a couple of questions on the transit stop signage project. One is just it wasn't clear to me from the enclosure whether is phase 2 like the final phase of this project. Will all stops have the updated signage at the end of phase 2 completing in 2027?
That is our understanding, but we can ask SFMTA to respond as well.
Hi, yeah, confirming that those will be all the stops will be completed at the end of phase 2.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. Hi, sorry. My name is Kira Barson. I am a transit service planner with SFMTA, and I have been co-managing our landor sign program.
Thank you. Great, thank you so much. And then I'm really excited to hear that there is an inventory of stops planned as part of this phase. I was wondering if we can expect that once this inventory is built, would this provide a way to make sure that signage stays up to date in a pretty timely manner when routes change in the future? The reason I'm asking is because I know of, stops along Market Street where there are route signs that are outdated by like almost a decade. And I was wondering if the inventory will help us develop a quick timeline for making changes like that.
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, as part of this project, we've built in like an update process. So every time we make a stop or a service change or a routing change, which we do about 3 to 4 times a year, it is now built into the signage program to update all of the relevant signage as well. So the inventory will exist and those changes are now being made in a timely manner.
Great, thank you so much. Not seeing any other questions or comments from members. Is there any public comment in the room on this item?
Edward Mason, regarding the Golden Gateway project, since we're going to excavate around the fire hydrant, are there any other excavations or any other utilities in that block that need to be evaluated or repaired? Because I see so many projects where we go in and do something, and then, 6 months later, we're in there tearing it up again. So has that been considered? Regarding the transit enhancements, are these independent signs and not connected to the new transit shelters that Muni will be procuring in the future? If they're going to install these signage now, is there going to be sufficient room and maneuverability to remove the existing shelters and replace those with the new shelters? I'm just playing, I guess, devil's advocate on that because I don't want to see somebody slapping their forehead saying we forgot about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Amelia, you have to stop the timer and not share your screen.
I do not see it.
I don't see it.
Great, public item on, public comment on this item is closed. May I have a motion and a second to approve item 4? Member Milford Rosales,
Motion to approve item 4.
Second.
seconded by member Ford. I think we could take this same house, same call without objection. Okay, great. Yep, the motion passes. That puts us on item 5, which is to adopt a motion of support to approve programming priorities for up to $5,342,000 in San Francisco's estimated fiscal year 2024-2025 state transit assistance county block grant funds. And this is an action item. And we have Mike Pickford again to present this item.
All right, thank you. So in 2018, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission established the State Transit Assistance County Block Grant Program to be administered by congestion management agencies like the Transportation Authority. These funds were previously distributed via the Regional Paratransit Program and Regional Lifeline Transportation Program. Revenues come from the state sales tax on diesel fuel, which is a very volatile funding source, and only transit operators may receive funds. STA funds are one of the few programs where the Transportation Authority can direct funds to support an operating program, but these can also be used for capital infrastructure investments. MTC requires that CMAs submit programming recommendations by May 15th of each year. So this year, MTC estimates that we will have up to $5.3 million in the STA County Block Grant funds. Because the final revenues are not known, MTC advises us to program up to 95% of the expected revenues, with consideration to programming up to 100% should the revenues end up meeting at full projection. So consistent with, in terms of our recommendations, consistent with past programming cycles, we are recommending programming $3.3 million to SFMTA's paratransit program to complement Prop L funds and support this critical program for seniors and people with disabilities. We also recommend up to about $357,000 for BART's elevator attendant program in the current and the next fiscal years to help cover higher than anticipated costs. We also recommend programming up to about $1.68 million for the first year of operations for WIDA's new Treasure Island electric ferry service, which will increase mobility options and reduce emissions in the area. We have a little bit more detail about each project. The SFMTA provides paratransit services to persons with disabilities in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. The program also includes the Shop Around Shuttle, the Van Gogh Shuttle, ramp taxi incentive programs, as well as the Essential Trip Card. These programs are critically important to people with disabilities, as well as the elderly who are unable to utilize other forms of public transportation. The recommended funding is equal to the amount provided in previous programming cycles and complements the $13+ million programmed in the sales tax for paratransit next fiscal year. BART's elevator attendant program provides attendants from the nonprofit Urban Alchemy to monitor each elevator at the 4 downtown BART and Muni stations, Civic Center, Powell, Montgomery, and Embarcadero. Attendants help improve safety, mobility, and accessibility for customers who rely on elevators to access the transit system. They discourage undesirable behaviors, improve elevator cleanliness and reliability, decrease fare evasion, and reduce maintenance costs. The program also supports economic recovery for downtown San Francisco and encourages people to use transit. We have funded this program with STA funds since 2019, and BART and SFMTA contribute equally to the cost of the program. We're recommending about $357,000 to cover cost increases. In May 2023, the board programmed STA funds for 2 fiscal years, 2023-24 and 2024-25, for operations of the attendant program. However, costs have come in approximately 7.8% higher than expected due to the need for additional personnel and higher costs for benefits and equipment like uniforms and radios. It is possible that additional funds from last year's cycle will become available to the project, which would reduce the need for the currently recommended funds by a dollar for dollar amount. We won't know the final amount until fall of 2024, which is why we're recommending up to $356,901. Those the FY 23-24 STA revenue, so that was the funds that the board approved in May 2023, are currently coming in above the 95% level, which is pretty good, and that has already reduced the need to cover the full $526,000 of parts, the cost overrun. So we will hope that those revenues continue to come in higher. So finally, we are recommending about $1.4 million at that 95% level, or up to about $1.68 million if the full 100% of STA revenues come in as seed money towards public ferry operations for a new Treasure Island electric ferry service. Fully electric ferry service will benefit the equity priority community of Treasure Island by increasing mobility options and reducing point source emissions that would come from a traditional vehicle or vessel. Ferry service to Treasure Island will support the expected increase in population from 2,000 residents to more than 20,000 new residents and 8,000 new homes, 27% of which will be affordable by 2042. The new electric ferry vessel will also meet coming California Air Resources Board and zero emissions requirements for any route that's under 3 miles in length. Ferry service has been a central component of improved transit access to the island since the 2011 Treasure Island Transportation Implementation Plan, which also included extensive outreach on the island. With that, I can take any questions, and we also have staff from the sponsor agencies who can respond as well.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation. Vice Chair Daniels? Oh, excuse me, sorry, I didn't see that there were other cards up before. Was it? No. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see the order. Did anybody know whose card went up first?
First.
Member Ford.
Blue. The elevator attendant seemed like a wonderful idea. How big is it's only 4 stations. How many elevator attendants do we have?
Okay, number 4, can you pull that mic closer? You can pull the cord, it's okay. There you go, thank you.
So just the question is, how many elevator attendants do we have?
Maybe we'll actually ask Bart to respond rather than I can go through the materials and try and remind myself the exact number, but I think it would be better to just hear it directly from Bart, if you don't mind.
Hi there, Rob Huckes, Manager of Grants and Funding Advocacy at BART. So with the Urban Alchemy contract, there's 36 elevator attendants staffing the 8 elevators across multiple shifts during BART service hours, BART and PD service hours.
Okay. Yeah. I was just trying to put that multi-million-dollar contract in context. Because it seemed like a large number. Was the Urban Alchemy contract a competitive bid, and how long did it run?
It was competitively bid. It runs through next year. And we are currently evaluating options for the next term of service, whether to renew. I believe there's an option to renew or whether to put it back out on the street to bid, not to bid, yeah.
Hi, thank you. Quick question. So I didn't hear all of the BART stations. I heard Civic Center, Montgomery, Powell. I missed the last one. And how did it come that it's only those BART stations? And how did you come to the understanding that only those BART stations would be served and not others? Thank you.
So the project is in, well, the fourth station was Embarcadero Station, so it's the 4 downtown BART, shared BART and muni stations. The project started as a partnership between BART and SFMTA as a pilot actually to staff those elevators following community input actually. So and then after following the pilot program, it's become a permanent program of those 4 stations. And because it was the partnership between BART and SFMTA, and those are the only shared stations we have, those are why there's only those 4 stations.
I'll add to that as well, specifically at the time, the pilot was in 2018. So at the time, this is the busiest stations for the system, for the whole district system. And hence we wanted to make sure that we had, the elevators had the attendance to ensure that, people felt safe, it was clean, it was reliable. And so again, as a pilot, it expanded, but it is because downtown was the busiest stations, and they continue to be the busiest stations. They're not as busy as it used to be, but they're still continuing to be the busiest stations for our district.
Vice Chair Daniels.
All right, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate the work of the elevator attendants. I believe that it's great work. It's been ongoing for 6 years. I really appreciate that. My question is more around has BART or SFMTA considered bringing this work in-house? I mean, unfortunately, trying to continue employment with a nonprofit on a long-term basis for this type of work that is definitely needed. I mean, nonprofit work can be very rigorous and the turnover for employees is usually very high. But work with organizations and entities like BART and SFMTA have been proven to lead people out of poverty and into middle class livelihood. So has that been a consideration? Is there a reason why we haven't brought this elevator attendant position to be a part of one of these organizations or entities?
I think that's a really good question. I don't know the exact answer to your question. I can come back and provide the SFCTA staff a better answer. If one of the things I will say is that Urban Alchemy does a lot of workforce development work for people exiting a lot of that have difficulty getting hired. And so that's one of the reasons that it's often good to work with them and put their folks to work. Whereas, with BART, as a governmental agency, it's a lot harder for us to do those types of workforce programs in-house. But that might be something we can look at. But so I'll have to get back to you with that information, yeah.
Thank you for that. And while you're looking, I would like to offer the 9910 series that the city and county of San Francisco has is definitely a program that bridges the gap with nonprofits and brings people into city employment. So that's something that you can probably mirror.
Oh, so I was just told that we are having discussions with labor about just that, so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Levine.
Thank you for the presentation. I have just a couple of quick questions regarding the WETA's Treasure Island ferry service. Yeah. Is funding actually in place at this time for the purchase of the ferry boat or the ferry ship, whatever they call it, the ferry? At this time, is it here? Is it supposed to be delivered by 2026. What is the status of that ferry?
We have staff from WIDA. Mike, would you like to respond to those questions?
Sure. Mike Doherty, Director of Planning for San Francisco Bay Ferry. We call them vessels. I called them boats for the first 10 years. I worked at WIDA and I was corrected every time by our operations staff. So vessels. Yes, the vessels are funded. We are our board authorized a request to release the RFP for construction last month. And they're anticipated the first one's anticipated to be constructed in 2026.
So I have a follow-up question. Why at this time are we committing $1.5 million to fund operations if it's not going to be ready till 2026, 27?
That's a great question. And this is a seed funding that will help us attract additional grant sources. We are in the process of applying for additional federal grant right now to help round out the funding plan. But the idea of these funds is to provide that seed to show local commitment.
So the funds won't actually be provided to WIDA until matching funds are available. And how does that affect it? Are the funds put in a holding pattern of some sort where it's not available to the agency at all?
Like most funding sources, these would be on a reimbursement basis. So until costs are incurred, there would be, these funds would not be spent.
Okay. Thank you.
As a follow-up to Member Levine's question, I was wondering, is there like a deadline by which if matching funds are not procured, we would consider allocating the funds to a different kind of operating expense, and would we consider 25 Treasure Island bus service as a potential alternative to continue to support the goal of better transit on Treasure Island?
There is no specific deadline. I think we would want to work with the MTC on an ongoing basis to understand how the ferry service is progressing. And if if it doesn't look like the ferry service is progressing on schedule, then I think at that time we would evaluate other options.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members before we go to public comment? Not seeing any, is there any public comment in the room on item 5?
Okay, your 2 minutes begin now.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Regarding the paratransit on-time percentages, what's that based on? Is that 30 minutes? And what is the on-time percentage or the on-time performance in minutes for taxis? If you do, I've done the math on this, and we're transporting 90 people an hour based on a 16-hour day. And I'm just wondering at $53 and $54 an hour or per trip, I would expect, I think that the taxis would be much more economical. And are we trying to get some of those trips into the taxi industry? Regarding the Treasure Island ferry service, according to my math, we're going to only have 24 people on a trip per, if you average it out. And, for the 16 hours a day, or the 14 trips per day. So, and the fare is going to be about $2.13 is what has been estimated. So I'm just wondering, is this going to be the preferred alternative? And I realize there's supposed to be a lot more people out on Treasure Island, but you have sea level rise. And keep in mind, Treasure Island was man-made, so the water is under there already. And the spoils from the Caldecott Tunnel have been spread over Treasure Island to try to raise it up. But I still have apprehensions on sea level rise impacting all the development that's going on Treasure Island. So maybe we should reevaluate and just rely on the 25 bus and have more of
Thank you.
those to operate service there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment on item 5?
Checking for remote public comment, and there is no remote public comment.
Great, public comment on item 5 is closed. Can I get a motion, the second in support of item 5?
I'll move support of item 5.
Moved by member Levine,
Second.
seconded by Vice Chair Daniels. Believe we need a roll call vote now.
Thank you. On the motion to approve item 5, member Bars absent, member Chen absent, Vice Chair Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Share my
Daniels, aye.
There we go. Vice Chair Daniels, aye. Member Davidson.
Davidson abstain.
Davidson abstain. Member Ford.
Ford, aye.
Ford, aye. Member Kim absent. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Margarita.
Margarita, aye.
Margarita, aye. Member Lopez Rosales.
Rosales, aye.
Rosales, aye. Member Ortega absent. Chair Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. The motion passes.
Great, that puts us on item 6, which is the preliminary fiscal year 2024-2025 budget and work program. And this is an information item. And Lily Yu, Finance Manager, is here to present this item.
CAC members, Lily Yu, Finance Manager. Today I'm here to present our preliminary annual budget and work program for fiscal year 2024-2025. This is an information item, and we will return next month to present and seek approval for the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget and work program. Our fiscal year spans from July 1st to June 30th of each year. The Transportation Authority administers the sales tax program. We function as the congestion management agency for San Francisco, administer the $10 Prop AA registration fee. We administer the traffic congestion mitigation tax or TNC tax, and act as the local program manager for the Transportation Fund for Clean Air. And we also operate as the Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency or TIMA. This slide shows how much we've collected in sales tax revenues over the last 8 years with budgeted information for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. Based on sales tax received through February 2024, we're on track to meet the amended sales tax revenues of $106.2 million for fiscal year 2024. For this upcoming fiscal year, we are holding sales tax revenues relatively steady, with a modest increase of $2.1 million up to $108.3 million. Our sales tax revenues represent 56% of our total budgeted revenues. This is our largest revenue source, and the 2% increase is mainly due to inflation. Looking back at recent years, fiscal year 2022 and 2023 were our main years of pandemic recovery. And now we're projecting a flattening in sales tax growth as we start to return to more normal growth levels. The return to workplace, business travel, and international travel all have been returning slower than anticipated. Total revenues for fiscal year 2024-2025 are budgeted at 193.3 million. And this slide shows the amended fiscal year 2024 budget estimates in gray columns. And I had presented to the CAC last month on the mid-year budget amendment. And also the preliminary fiscal year 2025 budget is shown in blue columns. Total revenues are budgeted to increase by an estimated 4.5 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And the increase is mainly attributed to sales tax revenues and program revenues. Vehicle registration fees are projected to decrease by approximately 100,000 or 2%. And we're projecting it up to $4.5 million. The decline in revenues is due to having fewer vehicles registered in San Francisco, which is consistent with declining population trends that we've seen during and following the pandemic. The traffic congestion mitigation tax is projected to be 8.5 million, which is at a similar level as the amended budget for fiscal year 2024. And this estimate is aligned with the city's controller's office most recent estimate for this fund source. Program revenues are budgeted at 70.5 million. And these revenues are mostly project specific under our role as the San Francisco Congestion Management Agency, including grant funding for the Yerba Buena Island West Side bridges and the I-280 Ocean Avenue off-ramp realignment project. Program revenues are projected to increase by 3 million, and that's largely due to increased state and regional funding sources related to the suite of Yerba Buena Island construction projects, including the Hillcrest Road Improvement Project, the West Side Bridges Project, and the Southgate Road Realignment Project. Total expenditures are projected at 266.9 million, and this is an increase of 16.7 million compared to fiscal year 2024. Of the total expenditure budget, our capital project costs, which are mostly awarded to grants to agencies like the SFCTA, are budgeted at 228.3 million. Capital project costs in fiscal year 2025 are budgeted to increase by 13.6 million, and primarily due to increases in the Congestion Management Agency programs for the YBI projects that I've mentioned earlier. Administrative operating expenses include personnel and non-personnel expenditures and are budgeted at similar levels as fiscal year 2024. And operating expenditures include personnel, administrative, commissioner-related, and equipment and furniture expenditures. We're including a budget of 42 full-time positions to support the agency's work program. We're also budgeting debt service costs of $25 million, which is an increase from fiscal year 2024 amended budget by an estimated 14.5 million or $3.2 million, 14.5%. This line item assumes fees and interest payments related to the expected full drawdown from the revolving credit agreement and our scheduled bond principal payment of $15 million. Also, our revolving credit loan agreement expires in October 2024, and we're also assuming additional costs associated with entering into a new short-term borrowing facility. Because our revenues are budgeted at 193 million and expenditures are budgeted at 267 million, we do anticipate the need to draw down approximately $65 million on the revolving credit agreement in order to be able to fund our expenditures this year. As you may recall, we budgeted $60 million drawdown from our fiscal year 2024 amended budget, and we have a 125 million revolving credit loan agreement to support our interim borrowing program. We'll continue to monitor capital spending closely, and we'll seek approval from this committee and the board when we need to draw down from the revolving credit agreement. The primary drivers of sales tax program capital expenditures for this coming fiscal year include SFMTA's muni maintenance, rehabilitation, and replacement projects, the light rail vehicle procurement, SFMTA's paratransit operations, and BART's next generation fare gates. Capital projects, the largest capital projects budgeted under the Prop AA program include SFPW's pavement renovation projects, the Mission and Geneva pavement Reconstruction Project and SFMTA's 29 Sunset Improvement Project. Also, the largest capital project expenditures in the CMA program, our Congestion Management Agency program, include the YBI projects, as I mentioned earlier, including the West Side Bridges Project, the Hillcrest Road Improvement Project, and the multi-use path. On the next few slides, I'll go over our agency's work program for the upcoming fiscal year. Many of these efforts will be familiar to you, and many of them have been rolling over from last year. I'll go over major highlights or notable efforts within our work program. The work program narrative is also included as an attachment to this memo. For the congestion management work, we will release an online interactive version of our 2023 congestion management program that allowed the public to interactively access key performance metrics. And for the downtown travel trends study, we are gathering data to study downtown travel plans before and after COVID to help inform strategies for downtown congestion management and revitalization. As the region updates for Plan Bay Area 2050, we will launch the San Francisco Transportation Plan update, or the SFTP 2050 Plus, which will incorporate projected population growth, reduced revenues, and transit fiscal cliff. Various other planning studies are underway in fiscal year 2024 and will continue in fiscal year 2025, including the Brotherhood Way Safety and Circulation Plan, the Bayview Caltrain Station Location Study, and the Geary 19th Avenue Subway and Regional Connection Study. Building on the Streets and Freeway Study recommendations, we will continue to work on planning and regional coordination for the San Francisco Freeway system. New federal grant funding efforts in fiscal year 2025 include the Gary Fillmore Underpass Community Planning Study, which will develop designs to better connect the Japantown and Fillmore Western Addition neighborhoods. And the Vision Zero Ramps Phase 3 study will focus on the safety at freeway intersections on San Francisco's high injury network. We'll also continue to lead 6 neighborhood transportation program projects listed here for districts 7, 2, 3, 6, 1, and 4. In addition, we'll work with our board to scope potential planning efforts for NTIP projects related to districts 9 and 7, as well as seek NTIP and or other funding to advance recommendations for districts 5, 6, and 7. On forecasting and data, our technology, data, and analysis division provides travel forecasting and analysis for several TA studies, such as the portal and SFTP 2050 Plus, as well as to city departments like SFMTA. We'll continue to work with the city and regulatory and community stakeholders to provide San Francisco's input to state and federal autonomous vehicle policy and rulemaking opportunities. We'll also complete our initial implementation of the next SF-CHAMP model. And in addition, every 2 years, we prepare and update the San Francisco Congestion Management Program. The 2025 CMP will expand performance tracking to include additional metrics and also incorporate equity priority community reporting where possible. In terms of funding, we'll be implementing Prop L and we'll seek board adoption for any remaining Prop L 5x PPs and the final strategic plan in fall 2024. This coming fiscal year, we'll work with project sponsors and MTC to advance candidates for the next funding cycles of SB1 programs, including the Local Partnership Program and the Solutions for Congested Corridors Program. With support from our financial advisors, we'll continue to manage our debt program, and we're preparing to seek approval to draw down on our $125 million revolving loan agreement when the funds are needed, which could be as soon as summer 2024. In terms of capital projects, we are leading the construction effort for the Yerba Buena Island West Side Bridges project, the Hillcrest Road Improvement Project, the Torpedo Building Pier E2 efforts as part of the Southgate Road Realignment Project, and the Ferry Terminal facilities on Treasure Island. We are also leading several project elements, including design efforts on the YBI multi-use path and the I-280 Ocean Avenue southbound realignment project, and advancing the Pennsylvania Avenue extension pre-environmental bridging study. Major efforts under project development support are listed here, including completing technical oversight and project development support to the Peninsula Corridor electrification project. And we're advancing the portal towards full funding and construction, and providing enhanced oversight and planning support to SFMTA for the Muni Metro Modernization Program and the Patrol and Presidio Yard modernization projects. In terms of transparency and accountability, this represents ongoing agency operational activities and administrative processes. Notable items for this year include completing elements of our racial equity action plan, and also work with the city's Office of Real Estate to establish a sublease of our current office space as our lease expires in June 2025. Finally, I'll go over our budget process through adoption. This is our first round presenting the budget as an information item to this committee and then to the board on May 14th. Following that, we'll be back and present the final proposed budget on May 22nd. And then the June 11th board meeting will serve as a public hearing on the final proposed budget with final approval by the board on June 25th. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from members? Member Ford?
Well, thanks for the presentation. Perhaps this is something we can defer to the next time we present to us. It would be useful for me, particularly on the expenditures, if we could get like a percentage of the total budget going to the different expenditure categories. So like what percent of the budget goes to the community maintenance versus paratransit versus Caltrans? Because of the list, they all sound great. I just can't really tell which ones are important and which ones aren't important when thinking about the budget. Yeah, that was my only, just to make it a little bit easier to follow. And then similar to that, like what percentage of work is going to planning versus capital versus expenditure? Again, to just focus my attention on like where is this actually going? Thanks.
If I could respond, please, through the chair, to Member Ford. The expenditure information is primarily reflective of project delivery information and as compared to the approved cash flows on the allocation request. So every time you approve of an allocation request, like in the prior item, there is a cash flow reimbursement schedule. And that is the general basis for establishing at least part of the recommendation for the capital expenditures from the sales tax. So these are approved grants, as well as some amount of anticipated new allocations in the coming fiscal year. So they're in line with the allocations that have been made. And in your packet of materials on the attachment 4 to the allocation request item shows the percent of funds to the 5 primary categories under Prop L to date. So it gives you at least a range of which types of projects have been funded. And those are the projects that have the cash flows that are reflected in our expenditures and our budget on an annual basis. But also incorporating updated project delivery information as well. So that's at time of allocation, and then we're consistently monitoring the cash flows so that the budget is reflective of the current status of projects, not just what agencies expected would happen at a time of allocation. So, so just to give you some context that these are primarily existing grants.
Thank you. I guess my request is a little bit to try to put those grants in context when I see the items come up. If the budget is $200 million, is this $5 million for BART staffing the elevators a significant part of the budget, or is it something we should just go through? And how to trade off. I guess maybe it's not even something that's worth considering, but when we budget in our house, like, we know that if we make the right choice on childcare, everything else will be easier because it's such a huge part of our family budget. I guess that's where I was aiming with this, I think at the end of the day, ultimately what we're doing is applying, is making decisions based on how the grants are passed around. So I want the grants, I want to be able to understand the grants a little better.
I mean, but that's a great question because our budget's a little bit confusing, but I think we can answer your question. So Lily was focused, not exclusively, but primarily on, the TA's agency budget. So even the little rinky-dink thing we lead on some of the big one, it sounds like your question is maybe these grants that the CAC is always helping us approve. We can easily divide that up by project phase, by cash flow by year, by sponsor, by the 28 or so programs in the expenditure plan. That trade-off context is within the strategic plan that has all of the money for all 30 years. So we can show you that. And then within a given program like street resurfacing, we can show you what the trade-offs were there in terms of what's been programmed, if that's what you're looking for. Or we can follow up afterwards, but feel like it's a little.
I'll have to, on the spot as a comment, it's hard for me to exactly point my finger onto like what would work or not. Because municipal budgeting, as I've learned in this community, is way more complicated than it seems at first. Right, and I think I understand the funding sources. The revenue side's very clear. It's the expenditure side that's more confused about. But otherwise, I'll yield this topic.
We'll follow up.
Member Davidson?
This is less about budget, but can you speak to when's the next time we will learn more about the I-280 Ocean Avenue southbound off-ramp realignment, since that was brought up? I understand that the Geneva side was postponed for this meeting, but yeah, I'm just curious where we are in those conversations.
We were just talking about that today, Member Davis.
Oh.
not here,
Okay.
but in the staff level. So you will get a email from the clerk offering individual briefings for whomever is interested in both the Geneva and the Ocean Avenue project, as well as the Vision Zero ramp phase 3. But in terms of coming forward to the CAC, we anticipate probably in the next 2 months, you would see another appropriation request, I think, for design of the Ocean off-ramp when you're Balboa Park College.
Right,
sorry,
right.
Station, City College.
And the Geneva side is TBD?
Correct. We paused it, hearing the feedback from the CAC, and are doing a little bit more outreach on that before it moves forward.
Thank you.
Thanks again for the presentation. I was curious, you described a flattening of the sales tax revenue growth that we've seen. I was just curious, it looked like from the graph that you showed that even before adjusting for inflation, that we were $5 million less in fiscal year 2024 compared to 2023, and I was wondering if you have any idea what's behind that. Is it more concentrated in certain parts of the city, and is there any reason to think that we're on a downward trajectory and that we would see less next year as opposed to the projected sort of flattening plus inflation?
Sure, thank you for that question. From fiscal year 2023 to 2024, we are projecting a decrease of about $5 million, as you mentioned. And that's mainly based on sales tax revenues that we received to date. And we haven't really collected as much as we had anticipated. We decreased our budget during our mid-year budget amendment. Also looking at sales tax receipts across multiple aspects, we are seeing lower revenues on the business travel and conventions have not come back from the pandemic as we had anticipated. And also international travel is growing slower than anticipated as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I remember Davidson was your correct. Okay.
Sorry.
All good. Are there any other questions or comments from members before we go to public comment? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment on this item? In the room, is there any remote public comment on this item?
No remote public comment.
Great, then public comment on item 6 is closed, and this was an information item, so we will move on to the next item. Thank you for the presentation again. That puts us on item 7, which is the state and federal legislation update, and this is an information item. And Maria Lombardo, Chief Deputy Director, is here to present this item.
So thank you for this, and pretend I'm Martin Reyes, who was here last time trying to present to you, but a lot has happened on this bill since then. Before I jump into the slide deck, thanks, Jerry, I just want to acknowledge that in the packet is the legislative table that has the positions on all the bills that the board has taken this session and their relatively current status. This is a very busy month, and hearings are happening yesterday, today, and changes are flying about. I was just going to focus on SB 1031, which is the bill that would authorize MTC to put a regional transportation measure on the ballot. But if you have questions, I believe we have John Paul Velez here who could help answer questions about the AV bills. I'm happy to come back. So the deck in here, I'll just go initially through what the structure was and sort of the origins and intent behind the bill. We'll talk about the position that the TA board took on the 16th, which was a support and seek amendments position. And then I will give you the hot off the press update. Things are literally changing every day on this bill, so we'll be coming back to you quite a bit. So let me just jump right into this. So this slide up here is just really just a reminder of the major impetus behind this bill for Senator Wiener, which is the pandemic-induced or triggered, exacerbated might be a better word, shortfalls that many, but not all of the transit operators are facing in the Bay Area. This graph shown up here is to facilitate an apples to apples comparison. MTC created a standardized estimate of transit operator deficits over the next several years, which is shown on here. And you can see they end up being about 600 million a year. It varies a little bit by operator and who's in there, but the biggest shortfalls by far are associated with the two largest transit operators in the Bay Area, which are the SFCTA and BART. And as you may recall, either from the news or from being on this committee, these shortfalls have been experienced for a while, but some of the operators had service cuts, which reduced costs. All of the operators received federal relief during COVID, and that money for many is gone or is about to be gone. And so when that's gone, this sort of term that people have been using is this transit fiscal cliff that is coming up. And Senator Wiener and many others are hoping to find some permanent source of state funding that can be used to provide time for the operators to sort of stabilize to this new normal, to attract ridership back and to update their financial portfolios to really replace lost revenues, particularly fare revenues for those who are most dependent on it. So that's the background, and keep that in mind because a lot of other interests come into this bill and make it a little bit more complicated than you might expect. So earlier in the legislative session, we had two bills on our watch table. I won't say much more about them, but one was this one focused on the fiscal cliff. The other was by Senator Aisha Wahab from the Union City area, the Bay Area, that was talking about consolidation of transit agencies in the Bay Area. And the leadership in the legislature told them to merge those two bills together, and that's how we got Senate Bill 1031, which is now known as the Connect Bay Area Act. And this bill is really kind of like four bills in one, so that's why it's a little bit complicated. So here are the four major components, which I'll just go over at a very high level. As I was just talking, one of the main components is statutory language that would enable MTC to put a revenue measure on a future ballot or enable it to put on the ballot by a qualified voter initiative, like a petition type approach. A second element has to do with regional transit network management. Translate that into English. That means codifying, giving MTC clear authority to help facilitate the coordination of the Bay Area's 27 some operators, so they operate in a way that's more efficient and more seamless and more customer facing. The third element is related to assessment of and a plan for consolidation of the transit agencies. And if you're hearing this for the first time, don't panic, the language has changed. And then lastly, there's relatedly some proposed changes to existing statute that let MTC and the Air District go to the ballot and require that employers offer TDM, transportation demand management measures to their employees if they're of a certain size. I know Member Rosales and others have been talking before about Caltrain, their employers buying the Go Pass for employees to get to work, and that falls under this element. So real quickly, I'll come back to the fun. The bill as it currently stands still has this very strong focus on enabling MTC, I'm just going to say MTC instead of the citizen initiative, to put a measure on the ballot no sooner than November 2026. It provides flexibility for MTC to work with stakeholders on the specifics of which revenue source would be used. The bullet up on the screen there shows that they're allowed to choose from a sales tax, payroll tax, a parcel tax, and a vehicle registration fee. MTC could put the measure on for up to or less than the 9 Bay Area counties. And initially it was proposed with those 4 buckets that are up on the screen. I will come back to that in a bit. And the first bucket, transit transformation, being the one that would allow operating money to keep the buses and trains running, as well as capital improvements like the wayfinding signage we saw, or a universal transit pass for the Bay Area. Regional network management, again, this is the customer facing coordination. These bullets give you a little bit of a better flavor for what that is intended in the legislation. The coordination of fares really has a lot to do with making consistency when people transfer between operators about how much you would pay or not pay, as well as that work on having the Bay Pass, which is the name of the current pilot for a universal transit pass, common or recognizable wayfinding at regional transfer points or key transfer points, having consistent mapping and wayfinding balanced with letting each operator keep their own logo and so forth. So it's kind of a common sense coordination authorities. This one I'll give you the update on. So Senator Wahab, not Senator Wiener, was the one that had proposed a assessment and then a plan to consolidate all of the transit agencies. Not surprisingly, that caused a great deal of heads on fire with that language, and it has been dramatically changed. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Right now, what it currently says is that there shall be an assessment of consolidation, but it has expanded the definition of consolidation to be very broad. Everything from legitimate, take two agencies, merge them into one, to really coordination functions. Just two examples, it could be agencies remain separate, but perhaps they join forces on back end activities, maybe on procurement, for instance. It also recognizes that operators coordinating together and with MTC may be able to achieve customer facing and efficiency improvements without actually changing the governance of their organizations. I know folks are still not happy across the board with this language, so that's why I'm saying don't get too excited. I think it's going to be amended further. And then lastly, the key part in the TDM, this is what Transportation and Management Means Ordinance, is if approved, the bill would add an option when MTC puts a revenue measure on the ballot to include a requirement that large employers defined as 50 or more employees in proximity to transit, which has not been defined, to purchase the regional transit pass. And the reason that is linked to a new revenue measure is that the transit operators want to ensure that if there is a regional transit pass, that they are held financially whole. And this relates to the whole Caltrain discussion the CAC had earlier. So those are the 4 current buckets right now that haven't lost you. Let me just give you a very high level. The amendments that the TA board endorsed earlier this month where the first one up here has actually been included in the language already, was to make sure that to the extent MTC's transit coordination authorities were strengthened, that there are corresponding financial guardrails to protect the transit operators from losing money or having to cut service as a result of complying with MTC policies. The second bullet is not yet in the language, but there is a placeholder in SB 1031 about the governance structure that would handle these transit coordination activities at MTC. Our recommendation is to make sure that transit operators themselves are represented in the decision-making process. Right now, the MTC board, for instance, is very suburban. It's not very urban transit focused at all. And transit operators have businesses to run and they have a lot of boots on the ground experience. So we want them to be part of the decision-making process. And then our last bullet has been largely addressed, but still work to do, which is basically we're saying the original language that was very prescriptive, basically saying consolidation is the end solution. We were saying we're okay with a study, but let's have a proper study that assesses the benefits of all forms of consolidation, other opportunities. So there's a lot of discussion going on, and just to give you a flavor of that, at today's MTC commission meeting, where they were discussing this bill, and MTC was hoping, staff was hoping for a blessing of language on amendments, the commission declined to take an action because just last night, a bunch of amendments came out that were necessary to get the bill out of committee. I might just give you one example of those. One of the amendments was putting a cap on the size of a sales tax increase. So before, the language had just said, MTC can do a sales tax increase, you go figure it out and do polling about what the increment would be. What got out of committee was it could only be a 0.5% tax increase, which I can come back to later. If the size of it, I should say, is a concern. If you remember the graph at the beginning with the transit deficits being around 600 million a year, balancing that with sort of the wisdom is a revenue measure that is primarily just to support transit operations wouldn't pass, that you need to have in there capital improvements for transit, for roads, safe streets and so forth. And to do that, you need a larger measure, or you probably need 2 measures. $1 billion probably isn't enough, and 0.5% sales tax increase gets about $1 billion a year in all 9 counties. Sounds like a huge number, which it is, but the needs are also huge. think. And then one of the other concerns I'll put out there besides the consolidation language, which is still causing a great deal of concern, is many of the counties around the Bay Area are also wanting to make sure they deem their fair share out of this, and not all transit operators are in counties that are having fiscal deficits. So I think MTC has done a really smart and clever way of coming up with the return to source framework, which I won't go into unless you have questions, but it does a good job of ensuring that everybody gets a minimum amount that is reflective of the amount those counties are putting into the tax, like who's paying it goes back, with a bucket that's about 15% of the overall pot. That's sort of a flexible regional bucket that MTC would use to address regional issues. So hearings are happening left, right, and backwards. There's a lot of work to be done on this. So it is never easy to get a bill like this through the legislature, and the region and all of our many stakeholders, and we sometimes have competing districts, interests have to be of a unified voice. And then we all have to be working together to get this through the Senate, which is probably the easy side, and then the Assembly. So sorry to rattle on, there's just a lot here, but happy to answer any questions. And I think it's that John Paul is here as well.
Great, thank you so much for the detailed presentation. Member Davidson.
Thanks for your summary. The section around
Can you
TDM.
talk into the
Just pull it up, there you go.
Yeah.
The TDM component, talking about how it would require large employers to purchase a regional pass for their employees. Does that eclipse, or would that take over any other option an employer would have? So I understand that there are some options where employers can create like active transportation programs, or they can custom and create their own, so that if you want to do a bike program, if you want to do another whatever. My question is, if there was this requirement, would employers still be able to incentivize other forms of transportation like bikes?
Member Davidson, I will double check, but first of all, so if you're a small employer, less than 50, then that requirement does not apply, recognized that transit. Right, it makes sense. I believe what it does require all those employers, the large employers, to buy the pass. It does not preclude them from doing other things, but of course, it's directing their resources toward that pass. And I will say that no one knows what the price point is of that pass yet, which is one of the big question marks that remains, and that's the focus of the phase 2 of the Bay Pass pilot that is actually testing with employers, where they have to, MTC is negotiating price points with employers based on their size and the type of transit services near them, and trying to get a feel for what's the point that's attractive to employers, but still doesn't, but still at least keeps transit operators whole.
Okay.
Member Levine.
Thanks for the presentation. It was really comprehensive. I have just a question regarding the autonomous vehicles, more a statement, I guess. I'm really supportive of AB 1777 and AB 3061, which puts a little bit of a squeeze on the autonomous vehicle reporting and incident reporting. I'm still very concerned that there's still no legislation to assist localities in trying to assume some control over AVs at the local level, and whether it means some sort of ability to fine or tax them at the local level. It doesn't seem as though there's anything that I've seen that supports local control over these autonomous vehicles, which in a city like San Francisco are becoming a major part of the vehicle traffic on the road. So I don't know if there's been any discussion about that, but in any event, I just want to express my disappointment that there's nothing that I see in the legislation to deal with these issues.
Member Lumina's note on the table, I think it's on page 3 of 5, SB 915 Cortese does take a stab at providing some local control. Yeah, it's far from a certain certainty whether it, how far it would advance through the legislature. So we are tracking out closely.
Okay, said my piece.
Member Ford.
So back to the corporate transit pass, such an unusual mandate. How do they treat work from home? And is that any part of this?
Yes, all good details to be worked out. Like I said, the theory is if what they're trying to do, I'll just say this, I don't have an answer for your question, right? Is trying to find a contribution from employers, a way to make it easier and incentivize folks to take transit, but also to generate revenue and attract ridership for transit. And as I said, the price point is unknown for many reasons, including the frequency of folks who work from home. So I will look in the bill to see if there's any sort of definition about employee being so many days in the office. I'm not sure they know that yet, though.
Member Bars.
Could you just, I may have missed it, on the amendment slide, could you bring that up again, please? I was trying to read in the notes. Thank you. And there was a fourth amendment, or was it?
These are the three high level amendments. There are a lot of little things we're chasing down as well.
Okay, understood. Okay, so it's the amendments really about making sure that there wasn't an unfunded mandate. All right, thank you. And on the topic of highway funding, because I understand that there's been some controversy about that, could you just speak to what the nature is of using funds generated from the original measure for highway widening or highway investments?
Great question. So that is one of the hot topics still to be debated at MTC, and that would apply to this. You see on the screen one of the buckets called connectivity. That I should say the climate bucket is now gone, but made eligible for safe streets and connectivity. That was just done to make return to source math work. But to your question, there is a big debate going on about whether highway widening, under what circumstances, or just even some highway improvements, which should be eligible for the measure. The language that MTC staff had proposed that has not been acted on by their commission is that they would allow highway improvements, including widening, that were done in a climate neutral manner. I know for some stakeholders, their stance is no widening whatsoever, period. Others are very interested in moving forward with their projects like express lanes, which in some cases, or many cases, can increase vehicle miles traveled, but can generate revenues that can then be reinvested in transit services, for instance. So that is a big debate that I believe the MTC Commission will tackle at their workshop tomorrow, and we're happy to bring an update. I don't think it will be resolved tomorrow, but they'll start talking about it.
Yeah, I would love an update on that for at the next CAC. And have we discussed an amendment along that line? Like, is there an opportunity to express interest in something or discussion about that in this body?
The CAC could for sure, this is listed as an info item, however, the chair and the minutes will reflect your direction. We did not include an extensive list of amendments when we went to the board in April, just as an explanation, because we knew the language was changing so quickly. We focused on the top 3 most important or high level ones, and we will follow up.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I have a couple of quick questions. One is, would this, SB 1031 authorize MTC just as like a one-time authorization to pass such a measure, or would it give MTC the power to do something like this again in the future? For example, if they put such a measure on the 2026 ballot and it didn't pass, could they do it again?
Thank you. One of the many details, yeah, as currently written, MTC could go back as many times as they want with that the voters could handle with any different revenue source until they have shots at the ballot until 2040, according to the amendments from yesterday. It's a long time.
Great, thank you. And then my other question is, could voters through a voter initiative put a regional measure like this on the ballot anyway, but just not like through MTC, or are voters not allowed to propose such a regional funding measure that would allocate the funds to MTC for some reason?
Great question. My understanding from MTC staff is that this bill has language that defines MTC as a district, which is necessary to allow that citizens initiative to be placed. Otherwise, I think they have to go county by county.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Are there any other questions or comments from members before we go to public comment? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment in the room on this item? Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Yes, there are two people who have remote public comment. Mike Swear, go ahead and go first. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Thank you to Commissioner Bars for asking the question on whether or not highway widening would potentially be funded for this. As discussed, there was a huge debate a couple months ago when this went before the MTC, and over 30 environmental and climate groups spoke out urging staff not to allow highway widenings as part of such a measure. There's obviously a huge need for transit funding, but it seems like these highway widening projects have no trouble getting funded, and certainly should not be funded in cases where transit is a viable option. San Mateo County has spent over $1 billion funding widenings leading up to the city immediately adjacent to Caltrain in direct competition with Caltrain, and that just makes no sense. There's no reason the taxpayers should pay for that. So I'm glad to hear that the commission can actually recommend to staff and or the board that SFCTA could recommend that anti-widening amendment be included, and I would recommend that you do so. It doesn't seem like something that would benefit San Francisco at all, and certainly runs counter to the climate goals, as well as just being a waste of money, because highway widening does not solve congestion. It simply adds more cars to the road. So I would urge the commission to promote that amendment to the board and recommend it going forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your public comment. And we have one more public comment. I think it's from Roland. Can you unmute yourself, please? Amelia, can you take down the slide for a second, please? Roland, go ahead. You can unmute yourself. Press star 9. There you go. Oh. Roland, press star 9 and you'll unmute yourself. Roland, can you hear me? Press star 9 to unmute yourself so you can give a comment. I load it. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
All right. Yes, your 2 minutes.
Can you hear me
begin.
now?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. That was star 6, by the way. Okay, but anyway, it's working. So doing this in 2 minutes is gonna be fun. And I did write to MTC about this, and unfortunately, I forgot to copy you. You got to split consolidation between consolidating operators and other agencies like CMAs. The only thing you can possibly consolidate for the operators is a very small operators, like maybe a couple of small bus lines in Napa or whatever. Trying to consolidate BART and Caltrain, etc., or Muni is absolute nonsense, and that needs to go by the wayside. Now, consolidating the CMAs, absolutely. I'll give you a typical example on previous items. You look at slide 15. You're going to find that the TA is the lead agency for the PAX. The TJPA is the lead agency for DTX, and guess what? Once you're on the other side, BART and Capital Corridor are the lead agency for Link 21. That nonsense has got to stop, and that's what 1031 is all about, and it will stop. The last thing I want to bring to your attention is that we can't carry on designing stations the way we are. Think about how we have to transfer between the central subway and BART and Muni at Power, for crying out loud. Or try to transfer between Caltrain and BART at Millbrae, or try to transfer between BART and the VTA Light Rail in Mid-Peters. That is absolute nonsense. We're wasting billions of dollars designing stations which are totally the opposite of being conducive to higher riderships through seamless transfers between modes of transportation. This is what this bill is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. And there is no further public comment for this item.
Great, thank you. Just out of curiosity, since this came up during discussion, what would be the process if this committee were interested in making some kind of statement on proposed amendments such as the highway widening?
Sure, for today, you could, members could just talk about it, but if you want at a future meeting, I can agendize this as an action item for the CAC to weigh in, and it looks like I should plan to do that for next month.
Yeah, sounds like maybe so. Okay, great. If there are no other comments or questions from members, that was an information item. So thank you so much for the presentation, and we can move on to item 8, which is the introduction of new business. And this is an information item. Member Levine.
Thank you. I would like to have a briefing by the SFMTA on getting an update on the Valencia Street fiasco. Clearly, nothing has been settled to date, and I'm as much in the fog about how the SFMTA is dealing with business and the bike community and the parking issues, and it would be really, really helpful for me anyway to get a full update about what they're doing and where they're going, and whether there's been any progress with the community in resolving that conflict.
Vice Chair Daniels.
Yes, Chair, I would like to second the request for an update on the Valencia Street Bike project. And I would also like to request an update on the Trail Yard conversion. Just specific around what's going on with the proposed housing. I heard that there were some changes happening.
Member Davidson?
What options do we have in terms of the Frida Kahlo bike path right now? So I'm getting emails from advocacy organizations saying that I should support the Frida Kahlo bike path, that it's not robust enough around active transportation needs. It's being watered down in the name of saving a couple on-street parking spaces. And so I'm less interested in getting an update, but I don't know how to use this position to more clearly advocate that we should continue to support more protected active transportation infrastructure. And it is okay to get rid of the, I think 6 parking spaces, I think is what's getting held up. If my memory serves me correctly. So what is the best mechanism for that?
I can't, Davidson, I'm so sorry, I owe you a response to your email, but I can't really respond during introduction of new items to that, but I will follow up.
Okay, because it's not a new item.
It's the way, it's a bit confusing, the way introduction of new items works is members can raise topics, but we can't have a discussion on them because they weren't noticed ahead of time, so I see.
Okay, so I'd like to raise the Frida Kahlo bike path. Or redesign right now.
Vice Chair Daniels was your card from earlier. Do any other members have new business? Not seeing any. Is there any public comment on new business? Not seeing any. Is there any remote public comment on this item?
Not seeing any remote public comment.
Great. Then that puts us on item 9, which is general public comment. General public comment is on items under the Transportation Authority CAC's purview that are not otherwise agendized at this meeting. Is there anyone in the hearing room wishing to give public comment on item 9?
Yes, thank you, Edward Mason. I realize it's not directly under the purview of the Transportation Authority, but the commuter shuttles have an impact on the transportation demand management and the SF CHAMP that's going to be revised. My observation is, and it really struck me this last week in the evening, about 6 o'clock, when I was waiting for the 24 bus, looking west into the sun, to see multiple commuter buses pass 23rd and Castro empty. These buses are proceeding empty and they just continue on their route till the end. I can't believe that they don't turn them around, there's nobody to transport. I guess they're under contract to continue to the end of the line empty. So it just baffles my observations as to why we are allowing this to continue. It is just amazing. The number of buses, and when those buses struggle to go up Castro Street from 24th, and see all the, exhaust, and the whole thing is just so mishmashed. And we're really suffering under paying for the culture of convenience. When you have Caltrain that's operating at a third capacity, and people could take buses and transit to Caltrain stations for their trip along the peninsula. But the power of the the businesses and the corporations is such that, employees demand it and they're being satisfied, but with work, from home and all, you know, the ridership, even presented by Muni before, you know, ridership's down to 12,000 from 17,000. So, my time is up, but, I'm just expressing my frustration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there any remote public comment?
Yes, we have two more. Mike Swire, go ahead. Start, your 2 minutes starts now.
Yeah, thanks again. One more widening comment. I wanted to make sure that everyone had seen that the driver who had killed the 4-year-old girl on 4th and King last year in the crosswalk was not guilty of any or not assessed any jail time. It seems like streets are truly lawless. And again, I would like to ask the commission as well as the board to immediately put a halt to the direction in which the 280 widening project at King Street is heading. Last we heard from SFCTA engineers is that they were favoring a widening option over a conversion option, which would be far less expensive as well as less environmentally detrimental, as well as producing fewer cars in the street where this girl was killed. And before that project gets more steam or we spend more money investigating an option that's politically infeasible, I would urge the commission and or the board to make it known that this is something that they're not interested in pursuing, and allow staff and the engineers to focus on more beneficial options. So I would ask that you agendize that in the near future and let it be known that that is not, you are not in support of highway widening on 280 at King Street. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your comments. You put the slide down, Amelia, so I can thank you. We have one more public comment. Roland? Go ahead. Thank you. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you. That worked better. So first of all, I absolutely second the comment by the prior speaker. I personally nearly got killed at the exact same location 10 years ago, attempting to transfer between Caltrain and the Muni, the N line. It was a bike. He didn't stop, the car stopped, but he didn't, and he blasted through King at 100 miles an hour. And I already had 1 foot on the street, and he missed me by about 10 inches. And that goes back to the point I made earlier about how you design, you know, transfers between modes and Vision Zero. But the one thing I didn't want to touch on, I'm looking at a brand new Zoom interface, and I had problems locating the raise hand button earlier. I had a quick comment on the minutes on page 3, when he said that I had concern about contracting this WMH corporation because the president and chief executive officer is William Hadaya. I've got absolutely no concern whatsoever with William Hadaya and WMH, you know, doing business with the authority. I just mentioned it in passing that he used to be the chair of the VTA CAC, and at that time he was engaged on the VTA contract, and there was a clear conflict of interest, and the situation was resolved very simply by him resigning from the CAC, and he continues to this day to produce some really excellent work for the VTA and many transit agencies through the entire Bay Area. So I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Thank you and good night.
Thank you for your comments. We have no further public comment for this item.
And public comment is closed. And that puts us on item 10, which is adjournment. Thank you all. This meeting is now adjourned.